Welcome to Someone's Gotta Drive, where typically I do put a little disclaimer about how my podcast may talk about, traumatizing things. It can also be validating. We've kind of gotten past that point. In my last episode, I mentioned how, my current husband tells me that he loves me and I meet his grandparents and how life was wonderful. And, past 12 years have been. There were times where my ex-husband would sit there and say, I know you cheated on me, and how do you expect him to ever trust you knowing what you've done to me? I've always been upfront and honest about my life and everything we were doing, and he knew. He knew very well what we were doing. So trust has always been something that we have had a strong foundation of. And I've always been open and unapologetically me. And I remember at first, when we were living together, how I would be told that his parents kind of, frowned upon boyfriends and girlfriends living together prior to marriage and things like that. But honestly, I was the kind of person that I was like, I've been on my own since I was 17. I'm now 28. Unless you're going to start paying my bills, you're not going to tell me how to live. Like, that's just kind of how I was about it. And so, 2015 was great. It was hard, but it was great. We ended up leaving the fireworks company that we both worked for. And I just quickly got whatever job I could get. Meanwhile, my husband wanted to be an accountant. And so he was kind of holding off on, that accounting job and trying to find the perfect job. It took him about 3 months to try to get a job in accounting, but he got there. And when he did, he was so thrilled. But I had no idea what being an accountant was all about. Nowadays, I tell people, my husband's an accountant, and they're like, you don't see him for 4 months out of the year. But back then, I didn't understand. And he was like, look, this is what I want to do. And I was like, okay, great. I want to support you in anything you want to do. And then tax season hit. And I was like, what the hell did I get myself into? He went into that job interview wearing a suit and tie, just like any self-respecting human being probably would. However, at the same time, he also, when he had that interview, he actually had an interview with people wearing like jeans and t-shirts. So he felt extremely overdressed. But when tax season hit, that was when it was working 9 to 9, 10 o'clock at night, at least 3 days a week, working 6 days a week, if not closer to the deadline, 7. And when it came closer to the deadline, he was working sometimes until 1 o'clock in the morning, and then at the really end of the deadline, like 4 or 5 o'clock, almost 24 hours round the clock. And, when we had this discussion about what type of jobs we wanted to have that would work best with our relationship, he had looked at me and said, you need to have a 9-to-5 job because I want you on the same schedule as me. I don't believe our relationship will work out very well if we're on opposite schedules. And I agreed with that. But now we're looking at you're kind of on a different schedule than me. So why am I the one stuck working 9 to 5 and you're working around the clock? Not for nothing. It's not what I signed up for. I moved to New Jersey to be with you. I don't know anybody. What am I supposed to do? Just sit in my apartment and watch TV or something? At the time, it was really hard for me to truly comprehend all of, this big change. And at a certain point, he was just like, well, this is just what I want to do, and you're just going to have to deal with it. And I was like, then maybe I should just go back to Maryland. At least there I know people. And he was just like, wow. Like, it really took him, aback for a minute. And, I was just like, I understand that we're trying to build ourselves better lives, but if you're not going to take any time out for me either, then I hate to tell you this, like, that's not going to work either. And so as much as we didn't really fight too much our first year, that second year where we were, kind of trying to figure this all out, that was, on the other hand, a bit touchy. And we fought. We fought more than we probably have our whole marriage and relationship. And we kind of came up with this game plan of, well, Fridays, he would leave at a respectable hour, like 5:30. And we would go out to dinner and we would have a date night. No cell phones, just me and him going out to dinner. How was your week? Trying to prioritize each other. Because the reality truly was that, honestly, I did move to New Jersey to be with him. That was the reality. And I'm not going back to living and staring at four walls. That's what most of my teenage years were like. And granted, I had some freedom, like I really could pretty much go anywhere I wanted to go. I don't want to go for a hike by myself. I understand that there are risks involved in, say going out for hikes and doing things by yourself. So we got through that tax season. And at the time, his office was actually like maybe 6 blocks from our house. He could walk to work. It wasn't that bad. But then the next year, the office moved. And where he had originally a 6-block commute, now turned into a 45-minute commute one way. And those hours didn't get better when it came to tax season. But that's what he wanted to do with life. And to this day, I support him in whatever dreams that he has. For him right now, he just feels like this is what he knows how to do and how to make money and how to make decent money. So he's going to do it. That year was my second year of being away from Maryland and being separated from my ex-husband. Now, I never legally signed documentation for separation. The reason why was because if you could prove that you lived in another location from that person for 1 year, the separation was valid. There was no reason to file and pay money for extra paperwork when honestly, he was living out in the Midwest somewhere and I was living in New Jersey. So we had our proof. We also had, traveled. We started traveling a little bit and learning that we really do love to travel. Not exactly the traveling part, but going and seeing new places. And that was the year that I took him to Alabama to see my dad and meet my other family members and to really kind of see where I'm from and who I come from. And with the little tiff that we went through that year with that tax season, we learned that what really mattered the most to us was each other. It might not be jobs, and we understand that those jobs give us the lifestyle that we want to live, but what really meant more to us was each other. And there were times where he was really dreading coming home because he knew I was upset. But he knew I was upset because I just wanted to feel like I mattered. And to not just be there for his enjoyment and let him walk away. That was also the year when I had to sit there and say, I understand that we're living together and like we're doing this kind of like playing house thing, but where do we stand with our future? Because to be real, I was 29, 30 years old. These are kind of my prime years. And all he could ever say was, can we just take it day by day? And after a while, I was kind of like, I'm not asking you to marry me. I'm just asking if you see a future. Because if you don't, I'm also not going to keep, yanking your chain or having you yank mine. And that was when at least the conversation came up of, yes, we see a future together. Every once in a while, I would get a threatening call from my ex-husband or an email. Sometimes he just wanted something like, proof that I had paid the lease or, things like that. But for the most part, we kind of lived our separate lives and we were just happy that way. After 2 years, though, I decided it was time. It was time to file for divorce. And honestly, it was much easier. We didn't own any property. We didn't have any children. The only thing that we honestly owned together was this car that I was driving around. Honestly, it really wasn't worth anything. So, the lawyer friend that I had spoken with prior didn't want to represent me for certain reasons, like in case he ever needed to represent my current husband for any reason against me or to defend in any way. It was one of those things where he was like, look, I think you should get represented by somebody else. And the person that he had in mind was actually a real estate attorney. She was like, I'll take your case on. It's just paperwork. It's not that hard. I said, yeah, the hard part is trying to find him. He won't let me serve him where he lives. And in the state of New Jersey, that's the requirement. They have to be served in the place that they live, not at work, not at, someone else's house. And he just kept saying, oh, give my sister's address. Here you go. And so we went online. My current husband did some really good investigative work. And he actually found a deed that was signed by my ex-husband. And he shows it to me and said, is this his signature? I'm like, yeah. And attached is a letter that says, a notarized letter on top of it all, saying that these two people brought before me are indeed married. And I'm like, married? Maybe I'm divorced by default. Now, wouldn't that be something? That maybe he went ahead and got a divorce in the state that he was living in, and I just didn't know about it. So we did a bunch of research, and that, unfortunately, just wasn't the case. But what was the case was that he actually needed that person and needed to be, quote, married to that person in order to get a deed, in order to buy a home. And that person's name had the same name as me as well. I found out that as long as they didn't use my social security number, I was in the clear. But that doesn't mean that they didn't commit real estate fraud. And with it being over $100,000, it was a federal offense too. So my lawyer at one point called him, said, look, you don't need a lawyer. I am representing your ex-wife, but you don't need a lawyer. You just need to sign the paperwork. She wants nothing from you. Just sign here. And he was giving her some hard time. She kindly just simply stated that, well, we know that you've committed real estate fraud. And so you could either sign the divorce papers and just be rid of her, or We'll just make sure that the right people know that you committed real estate fraud. And, go from there. Well, question was, where do I sign? He signed those papers really quick. My divorce lasted maybe 4 months at that point, from start to finish. And I go into the courtroom that day and I'll never forget it. I'm sitting there grinning from ear to ear. He's on the phone laughing as well. And the judge is just like, I've never seen two people so happy to get divorced in my life. And we were like, just so thrilled to be done with this. I paid for everything. My current husband also helped pay as well, let me be real. But my ex-husband did not pay a dime. We just wanted to be done with this. The second I had gotten divorced, everyone was like, so when are you going to get married again? And I remember just telling everyone, can I be single and divorced for like a year? Like, can you give me that? Because I've technically, even though I'm with, my guy, I have still technically been married. And I really, really, really just don't want to be married right now. I just want to be me. I want to have fun and I want to feel this freedom. And honestly, yeah, I really wanted to marry my current husband. And deep down, I really wanted that. And he knew that. But I just really wanted, for once, for the first time in 8 years, to feel like I am not married. To feel like some single woman who is just living with her boyfriend, and that be it. And at this point, we've been together for probably 3 years. And it was the fastest 3 years of my life. And, it was just so crazy how I felt like up until the time I left Maryland for New Jersey and left to be with my current husband, man, those years felt long. Like when you're a child and you're like, man, everything just feels like it takes forever and that like adulthood's so far away. Like my whole life up until that moment just felt like it took forever and dragged on. And now the past 3 years have just flown by. And it was honestly the most wonderful and miraculous 3 years that I had ever had. I started working for an electrician and was really becoming someone important. I pretty much helped him run his whole business, doing all the estimates and invoicing and doing a lot for that company. And it was kind of nice. I moved to New Jersey and I finally feel like I belong. And that meant more to me than anything. I really needed to start feeling like I belonged somewhere, and I found that place. And after the divorce, we went to Puerto Rico on vacation. I probably celebrated that divorce for at least a month. And I had also gone through my second tax season and really learned how to, I guess kind of cope with it. If this was the life that he wanted to live, and this was the job that he wanted to have, well, guess what? It was my job to support him in that, make him 3 square meals a day to take to work with him so he could stay energized and fueled up, and just kind of work and do my own thing as well. He never gave any inkling to wanting children at that point. It was starting to get we were starting to get a little baby crazy, let's say it that way. At least I know I was. And I would feel really bad about it. But honestly, I have been told that don't expect to be able to have children. My eating disorder in the past had been so bad that, I just didn't really have enough nutrients even in my body to be able to support a child. And don't get me wrong, by this point, my eating disorder was pretty much done with. and I was doing very well. But that doesn't mean that it doesn't have long-lasting damage. Damage that I wasn't even willing to have looked at because honestly, I just didn't want to know. But my husband, he didn't want children. He made it pretty clear to me up front. He did not want children. Period. End of discussion. And never did we have a scare either. So with that being said, I was always just committed to the idea that we're probably just not going to have children. That year in particular, we did all the same things that we normally do. We went on our family camping trip. We went on a nice vacation. We worked very hard. We went on hikes. We did all the great things. That year for Christmas, we got our tree. We celebrated Christmas the way we always had to. And honestly, celebrated New Year's the same way we had always had to. We started our own traditions, and every year it was nice that we had our own little traditions to go by. That year we came home from our New Year's getaway with his grandparents up in the Adirondacks of New York. And on our way home every year, we would just say, all right, well, where do you want to go this year? Where do you want the vacation to be? What we always try to think of something great to think about for the next year. And for our vacation that year, he just looked at me and said, so where do you want our vacation to be this year? And I said, you know what? Hawaii. And I just, Hawaii just always sounded so far out of reach. It always just sounded, honestly, just so far away. Period. End of discussion. It is far away. It's halfway across the world from me. And so I just blurted Hawaii. And he went, okay, book it. All right, Hawaii it is.